can open cameras now. We're about to go live. Right, Siri, we are live on YouTube. I think the room is yours.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, comrades and friends, and welcome to this webinar, which is being held today, the 17th of December 2025. This webinar is being held as an event to commemorate the adoption of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and other people working in rural areas. Yes. This webinar is held. Yes, comments. I hope you can hear me now very well. Thank you so much, comrades and friends, and welcome to this webinar that is being organized today to be able to mark or commemorate the day on the rights of peasants and other people working in rural areas. As you know, that on 17th of December 2018, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peasants. So today we are here to meet and also mark the event because you know the declaration came in after a long struggle of peasants led by members of La Via Campesina. I would want to ask the participants that we are having translations. So if you would want to get translations, then you can go to the interpretation and choose the language that fits you. So today we are honored to be here with 5 panelists or speakers, and I will introduce them briefly, and then I'm sure that themselves are also going to introduce themselves once the meeting has taken place. Yeah, with us, we are honored today to have Professor Uche Ofodile, who is Africa's representative to the United Nations Working Group on the Rights of Peasants, and also a law scholar at the University of Arkansas in the USA. So Professor will be here to speak to us more about the purpose, the mandate, and the role of the UN Working Group in attainment of the rights of peasants. And of course, also underscoring the importance of the declaration as an instrument for attainment of the rights of peasants. And of course, she will also be trying to highlight some of the reports and also give the importance of such reports in attainment of the rights in the declaration. Also with us is Rachel Mwikali, who is from Kenya. She's a co-founder of the Coalition for Grassroots Human Defenders and Pussy Power, which is a movement that is focused on championing the rights of women, girls, and she's been at the forefront in Kenya, among others, trying to fight against femicide. Of course, with us here is also Mr. Hakim Balinaire from Uganda, who is Hakim is the chairperson of the Eastern and Southern African Farmers Forum, Uganda, SF Uganda. He's the chairman of the board and also a member of the board of directors, the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. Also, one of the speakers is Ngoni Chikoe, who is from Zimbabwe. Ngoni is a member of the Zimbabwe Smallholder Organic Farmers Forum, and also a peasant practitioner and activist from Zimbabwe. Welcome. And then, of course, last but not least is Harry May. Harry May is from South Africa. He is a member of the Food Sovereignty Campaign in South Africa, and also Food Sovereignty Campaign is also a member of La Via Campesina, Southern and East African region. Maybe it's also important to note that ZIMSOP and the SF Uganda are also members of the Via Campesina, Southern and East African region. Yeah, so as I said, I will just be giving a brief introduction on background of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peasants, the journey, and briefly the journey for the adoption of the UNDROP took almost 20 years, and it started by peasant movements in Indonesia, members of La Via Campesina, when they held a meeting, and the issue was escalated within La Via Campesina and allies globally, which after a long struggle that included lobbying the governments within our countries, finally the declaration was adopted on 18th December in 2018. I mean, on 17th December 2018. And that's why we are here today, 7 years later, to be able to ask ourselves whether, because the declaration came to defend the rights of peasants. And of course, you know, one of the biggest challenges with the declaration is that most of our countries say that the declaration is not legally binding. And La Via Campesina, having succeeded in pushing for the adoption of UNDROP, then we ask ourselves, then how else are we able to ensure that the rights of peasants are enforced? And thus, therefore, we also started a process which culminated into the establishment of the working group on the rights of peasants. And this working group on the rights of peasants has got mandates and purpose and roles to play. And of course, as I said, we are going to get more on that from Professor. So, in brief, that has been a journey. And of course, from the reports that we have been having across the world, and if you have been privy to the reports of the working group, you realize that working group has been releasing reports, and in those reports, they have a lot of information about good practices, about reports from organizations, and I know Prof is going to speak to us about that. And that's why today, as Kenya Peasant League and La Via Campesina, Southern East African region, we thought that it was important for us to have this meeting and, of course, try to take stock. And apart from just taking stock, also believing that the speakers who are here are going to lead us into perhaps not only describing the situation, but also trying to tell us then, according to them, then what are some of the way forwards that we are looking at. So before, in terms of the program, we are going to have Prof start us up, and Prof will be laying ground from the working group perspectives. And then after that, we'll be having a panel composed of Rachel, Hakim, Harry, and Goni, who will be giving us now country-specific issues, like, for example, which laws in their countries are actually in line with UNDROP, which ones or which actions in their own countries are actually challenging or maybe say limiting the implementation of UNDROP. And then after that, we are going to have a small plenary or Q&A session where all of us will be able to interrogate and maybe give our views to the speakers. And we also want to ask the participants to be maybe jotting their notes, questions. You can also put them on the chat so that once we hit that time, then we are going to have them answered. Yeah, so without much ado, I will take this opportunity to welcome Prof, who is going to speak to us for about 15 minutes on the working group, the purpose and mandate, and of course also touching a bit on the annual report that the working group has been talking about. And I know we are also organizing another webinar in February next year, specifically with the working group prof to be able to discuss on the ways of filing reports. And I believe that, or filing complaints with the working group, and I believe maybe she'll also be touching on that this time. So welcome, Prof, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you myself.
Okay. Yes. Wonderful. Good afternoon. And thank you to La Via Campesina for this invitation. I was very excited to receive this information because I'm really longing to connect with groups in Africa. And the invitation came at a great time. So thank you so much for this invitation, and I hope that this partnership. I'm here to talk more about, as he said, the working group. I myself, I am Uche Ofodile, as he already introduced. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm on the working group representing the African region, but the working group works as a group. So within the working group, the need to highlight and challenges that are peculiar to Africa. Hello?
I don't know if it's my, I don't know if my side, you are breaking a bit. I don't know if it's on my side.
Me?
But now you're okay. Now you're okay. Now you're okay.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Just to put it in context, in Africa, we're dealing, I understand we have an estimated 33 million. To put it in context, the smallholder farms in Africa, they contribute more than 70% of the food. Put it in context, the smallholder farms, 80% of all the farms in the region. Okay, and the smallholder farmers, they represent the largest segment of farmers in Africa. So we're talking about a massive people. I also want to start just by putting in context the definition of peasants under UNDROP. UNDROP defines a peasant as anybody who engages alone or in community, small-scale agriculture, right, for subsistence or for market, right? And the person is somebody who relies significantly on family or household labor. And the person has a special dependency on an attachment to the land. So within this group, we have groups, so many individuals and groups that are identified as peasants. They include the pastoralists, they include the farmers, they include the fisher folks, they include agricultural workers, people who are working on other people's farms. Big group, okay? So now let me jump into the issue of the working group. After the declaration established in 2018, in 2023, the Human Rights Council established a working group. The goal of the working group is what I'm going to talk about now. The working group has several mandates. One, to promote the effective and comprehensive dissemination of and implementation of UNDROP, while identifying challenges and gaps in its implementation. I want to stay here for a minute because the issue of farmers and peasant rights have not been highlighted. This is perhaps the most significant mandate for UNDROP. Many people, many groups do not know anything about UNDROP. So one of our first tasks as a working group is really to promote its dissemination, to get people to even know that there's UNDROP. So some of what we've been doing is really, because you'll agree with me that if people are not aware of UNDROP, we cannot move on to the issue of implementation. Is to identify the gaps and challenges, and that is where stakeholders come in. We may not always know all the challenges and gaps in UNDROP, but you, the stakeholders, can immediately identify, and that is why partnership is very, very important. At the end of the presentation, I'll leave my email. I'll also send the working group's email. Let us know. Let us cooperate in identifying changes and gaps on UNDROP. One of the ways we've been trying to do this is we as a working group, we do issue call for inputs. And in those call for inputs, that's an opportunity for stakeholders, for the farmers, for the pastoralists to contribute and say, this is the problem we're having, this is the challenges that we're having. So I'm going to come back to the issue of our call for input and other ways that we can partner to see that UNDROP is actually effective. This working group is to identify, exchange, and promote good practices and lessons learned on the implementation, and to seek and receive information from all relevant sources. Again, this is very, very important. We believe that it's better to be proactive, to get the information, and I think that this is in another area where cooperation with stakeholders will help a lot, right? What are the best practices? What are the good practices in Africa that all countries that we can share so that others can learn? Are there good practices? If in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Zambia, are there good practices that the working group can highlight so that other countries can learn, right? And we seek and receive information. Again, this is where our call for input comes in. And I will highlight that it's very important that groups respond to the call for input. It is absolutely important. When there is a call for input, it will be, I can help with that. It would be great if groups in Africa actually respond and give us information that we need. The third mandate of the working group is to work in close coordination with the Office of the High Commissioner, with the treaty bodies, with other relevant UN agencies. And we are already starting on that. And it also talks about cooperation with regional bodies, regional mechanisms like the African Commission. We haven't gotten to that, but that is also something that I'm looking forward to establishing relationship with the African Commission, with the European Human Rights Commission, with the Inter-American Human Rights Commission, so that there's coordinated effort, so that issues that are peculiar to a region can be highlighted, so that the working group can work on it and focus on that. Another mandate is to facilitate and contribute to the exchange of technical assistance, capacity building, transfer of technology, cooperation. This is a work in progress because
Professor, somehow,
Prof, you're
sorry,
muted.
Professor, somehow you are muted. Could you unmute,
Yeah, you are
please?
muted. You are muted.
how that could have happened, but
Okay, it's okay.
Thank
You are
you.
now. You are now.
so where did I stop?
Literally
You were
5
talking-
seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
is to facilitate and contribute to the exchange of technical assistance, capacity building, transfer of technology, and international cooperation. And this is a very important mandate. This is a very important mandate where the working group can actually help in facilitating technical assistance. So, and this is actually important in this day and age when technology is growing by leaps and bounds. But it's not every technology that the smallholder farmer is even wants. It's not every technology that is to the advantage of smallholder farmers. Some technologies may actually be harmful to the smallholder farmers. And this is where exchange of information will help. What kind of technical assistance do groups in Africa need? And again, when I talk about peasants, please know that I'm talking about the farmers, the pastoralists, the fisher folks, the rural workers. What kind of technical assistance do the pastoralists in the Sahel need? What kind of capacity building do the fisher folks on the shores of Africa need? What kind of technology do we want? Do they need? Because as you know, Africa has also been a victim of receiving technologies that may be harmful to the continent. So dialogue becomes very, very important on this issue. What is working? What is not working? What do you need to bring to the attention of the working group? The last is to submit annual reports to the Human Rights Council and to the General Assembly. And it's supposed to contain conclusions and recommendations. We have published 3 annual reports. The first one was just more of a general background. The second was on the challenges that fisher folks and peasants are facing. And the third report was on the right to participation. For each of those reports, we've proceeded by asking for a call for input. Some we have received a lot of calls, a lot of input, but not particularly from Africa, I must say, not particularly from Africa. And this is an area where the African continent needs to wake up. And that is why I started my talk by looking at just the statistics. 33 million smallholder farms in Africa. Africa also has 60% of arable land in the world. So Africa should be at the forefront of implementing UNDROP, of highlighting the challenges in UNDROP, of highlighting the gaps. Africa should really be leading the conversation around UNDROP. The call for inputs should be something that stakeholders across Africa should always be on top of. Let me go on and talk about a few other things before I wrap up. So what the modalities of the working group? We've started with reports, and those are always very, very important. And I welcome you to look at our website, webpage. You see all the reports. The reports, as I said, it goes to the General Assembly, it goes to the Human Rights Council. We have also started, we haven't done our first country visit, but we're planning a country visit. There's been a lot of changes around resources in the UN. So the country visits used to be twice a year. And now we're being told it might just be 1 a year. But please note that the country visits are based on invitation by states. Right? We don't just show up in a country. A state must invite. And so we reach out to countries and we say, we would like to come. Some of them do not respond. Some of them will say, yeah, we'd like you to come, but not now. So that is one of a big challenge. And I'm mentioning it because stakeholders can actually get their government to invite and say, hey, why can you invite UNDROP to come? Well, okay, so I just want to say on country visit that not every country is dying to have UNDROP visit, and many of them actually do not respond to our request to come and visit. So if you're saying, hi, UNDROP should come to Kenya, our hands may be tied, and that's where the issue is. We also engage in consultation and speaking engagements like this. And I have also said to other groups across Africa that I'm always willing to speak, especially if it's virtual, because that is cost. It doesn't cost anything. So if there are other groups, fisher folks, pastoralists that want me to speak, I'm more than willing to do that. And of course, we're talking about capacity building too. Let me just jump to our reports. I'll just focus on one of our latest reports. This was August 2025. The report highlights some of the challenges that peasants are facing. I will encourage you to look at, because they provide specific examples of best practices. So the report talked about a number of things. The report talked about land grabbing and insecurity of tenure, green grabbing. The report talked about the impact of neoliberal reforms on farmers, including, foreign investment, trade, liberalization of foreign investment, financialization of land, and how that is affecting a lot of smallholder farmers across the world. Land is becoming very expensive. Land is being priced out of the reach of the ordinary farmer. The report shows and proliferation of funds, and that leads to land grabbing. It talked about concentration of land, and as land ownership concentrated, the smallholder farmers, the pastoralists are being squeezed out. The report also talked about something that I'm sure some of the other panelists are going to talk about, which is violence and criminalization and repression. Across the world, a lot of the human rights defenders, peasants, smallholder farmers, they're dealing with criminalization. Things that used to be just natural and occurring rights of farmers are being criminalized, and that is a big problem. And not just are the activities of protest has become a criminal offense. And so, and human rights defenders are feeling the brunt. Commission has talked about the challenges that human rights defenders in Africa face. The report also talked about stigmatization, public defamation, and lawfare, which is a big problem, that farmers that are trying to defend their land are stigmatized. Some of them are labeled communists, and that is across the world, farmers is a big challenge for peasants, particularly in Africa. We have a lot of armed conflict, and we have a lot of other types of conflict that don't even make sense, and that is affecting a lot of farmers and pastoralists and fisher folks. You think about Sudan, but it's not just in countries that have active conflict. In Nigeria, for example, a lot of farmers have been pushed away. A lot of farmers are afraid to go to their land. A lot of farmers have been rendered homeless because of conflicts. Some of them are between farmers and pastoralists. I mention it because within the umbrella of peasants, we should also be thinking about conflicts between farmers and pastoralists, conflict between farmers and fisher folks, conflict between different groups of farmers. And I think it's important as a family to raise issues about those types of conflicts. How do we resolve conflicts between smallholder farmers and pastoralists? What are the real issues? And how does UNDROP and the working group address that kind of conflict? We also have conflict between farmers within the group. We have farmers that are vulnerable, female farmers, youths, farmers with disability. How do we address their rights? How do we address their interests? I bring this issue also to highlight the issue of the vulnerability of farmers and the issue of multifaceted challenges. So a female farmer that is disabled may actually have more challenges than a male farmer. And within the family of peasants, we need to think of how to address everybody's interest in a coherent way. Let me also highlight the issue of rural workers. So farmers are already disadvantaged, but farmers can also hire and do hire help workers vis-a-vis the rights of the smallholder farmer. How do we deal with that? I'm sure my time is almost up, or if not up. So I want to move on to the issue of some of the recommendations that we made. We called on states in that report to recognize and protect territorial rights of all rights holders, to enact and implement riverine and maritime reform, to review past and present large-scale land acquisitions. We also called for, there were recommendations concerning protection, criminalization, and security, basically to reform some of the laws that are used to criminalize just ordinary protests that pose serious challenges. There were also recommendations concerning foreign food security, labor rights, and social protection. I want to say that the report talks about the formal recognition of the declaration. Many countries have not even acknowledged that the declaration exists. So my challenge to all of you is to check to see if your different countries actually acknowledge the declaration. They may have voted in favor of the declaration at the UN, but I think we all know that what as states in Africa do at the UN is often different from what they do when they come back home. So we're calling for states to formally recognize the declaration, international constitutions, legal frameworks, and development policies. We're calling for disaggregated data. I think one of the challenges in Africa is that we do not have data. We don't have data on on peasant rights. We don't have disaggregated data on peasants, and that is the biggest challenge. And this is where the NGOs and other organizations can help. What data do we have? What data do we have about farmers with disability, Rinka? What data do we have about youths in Africa that are into farming? We have no data, and that is one of the biggest challenges to programming. We also called for states to ensure legal recognition and protection for collective voices of rural workers. And we called for inclusive international forums. Let me just end here because I am almost sure I'm out of time. One of the important and I think great things about UNDROP is that it does touch on almost everything that is an issue to smallholder farmers. It addresses women specifically, and it calls attention to the challenges that women face. It talks about natural resources and the rights to natural resources. It has the basic political rights, but it also talks about access to justice. The farmers. It talks about the right to seed, the right to land, and the right to conservation and protection of the environment. So there's a lot that is in UNDROP. It cuts across the divide between economic and social rights and civil and political rights and brings them all together because address the other. One important thing about UNDROP is that it also recognizes the collective right. Collective, not just the individual farmer. And so we're looking into how collective rights are being violated across the board. I will end there for now, because in the Q&A, I could come back. But before I end, I want to quickly talk about filing complaints, what we call communication. UNDROP allows for communication. We don't really call it complaints. It allows for the working group to receive statements and complaints from individuals, from organizations, from civil society organizations. There are actually 3 types of communication that the working group engages in. Right? Urgent appeals are situations that are really dealing with urgent situations, life and death situations. The working group can deal with that, right? We don't want to deal with things after the fact, okay? So the urgent appeals that the working group can send to the UN, to the General Assembly, to the Human Rights Council. Then the second type is what is called letters of allegation. This is a situation where groups on the ground write letters of allegation to the working group. The working group looks at it and then reaches or states involved. Then the last part is what we call other letters. Maybe there's a bill, a legislation that is about to come through, or that a legislation that is being implemented in a way that is harmful to peasants, and it's brought to our attention. We can also engage in that. So urgent appeals, letters of allegation, and other letters. These are the kind of communication that the working group can engage in and send to the Human Rights Council. People on the ground. I want to say this and stop there, because at one of our meetings, there were urgent appeals from other regions, and I brought up the issue that Africa is not being represented in urgent appeals. Issue that situation, for example, in Sudan is really there. The response was that there was no letter, no submission from any part of Africa on this kind of issue. For the working group to work for all its constituents, including those in Africa, we need stakeholders on the ground to get involved about situations that raise. Submit information about allegations about violations of the rights of stakeholders, or submit information about bills that are pending that you very harmful to farmers, and you want the working group to get in and work. Even in the situation of Sudan, I brought up the issue that, well, there's no organization in Sudan equipped or to send submission. Any individual can submit information. So a group in Kenya can actually submit information in Mali or situation in Senegal. Some groups are more organized than others, right? The groups in Kenya may be more organized than the group in Sudan or the group in Chad, but you can actually submit information if you know about the situation in those countries. I guess my point is that there's need for collaboration among all the groups in Africa. I think there's need for collaboration among the different stakeholders in Africa. I think that it's really one family. The smallholder farmers is one big family. Between the groups in Kenya and the groups in Zambia and the groups in Nigeria is one big family. Let's see how we can strengthen the situation of smallholders and peasants across the African continent. Africa has a lot of resources. Africa can become the breadbasket of the world, but only if we pay attention to the rights of peasants. And to do that effectively, the working group needs help from the governments. We need support. We need resources. I haven't mentioned those challenges, but I'll come back to that in Q&A. But we also need strong partnership with stakeholders. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you so much. Prof, for that. And of course, having mentioned a key issue that is happening in Africa, and of course, the fact that even organizations in other countries are able to perhaps write urgent appeals. And of course, I think last week we were trying to discuss with our comrades in Tunisia, because we have quite a number of comrades from Sudan who are in Kenya now because they are running away from war, and we are trying to discuss. I think this has come at the right time. So thank you so much for that, and you have actually set good pace. And I would straight away welcome Comrade Rachel Mwikali, who is going to speak to us also about the care situation. I don't know, Rachel, are you going to share your screen, or can I share it from my end? Rachel, are you ready?
I think
Pardon?
CD, Comrade CD,
Yes.
am I audible?
You are breaking. You are breaking.
Are you able, can you hear me? Yeah, because
Yes,
I'm on the road. I'm sorry, but am I audible now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Let me try. And now, so I'll request you share.
Okay. Maybe Prof can stop sharing.
From your end, if you don't mind. And thanks, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Like your presentation really make a lot of also like intervention. Some of the intervention that you had to make, it's also in my presentation. And we're happy with the work you're doing on behalf of also the African continent and also African diaspora in fight for peace and farmers. So as CD prepares to share the screen with the presentation that I prepared, you all know also part of our CGHRD and principal work is also collaborating with the Kenya Peace and League in ensuring that there is a feminist approach on the right of peace and farmers. But at the same time, acknowledging that the numbers you gave us, Prof, it's a big number that cannot be ignored in terms of ensuring our rights as peace and farmers, our rights as movements from the global south or global majority is centered within the UN system. So CD, I don't know if you are ready. As CD prepares to be ready, this is also like a follow-up conversation from the meeting we had in Nairobi, hosted by the Kenya Peace and League and members of the La Via La Campesina, where also Ari and at the same time trying to center in the voice of young people, the voice of feminists within the space, and what it means even for some of our countries that we know clearly they are complicit of the multinationals that are trying to fight for the rights of our farmers, but at the same time we're linking it also with anti-rights, anti-gender movements, where we are seeing some of these corporations, they're financing our politicians to be able to get them into power to put in policies that work against us as Black people and against us as farmers. So I don't know if CD, you're in a position to get it.
Yeah, I have it, but I think I'm having a problem with sharing it. I don't know. You sorry.
And if not, maybe try to find.
Can you give share it from mine?
Let me try in a minute. I see documents. On my end is a bit challenging, CD. I'm trying to get it. Have you found it?
Let me share with Nyoni. Nyoni, let me share with you so that you can help me share.
Okay, because I'm trying to, because I'm in an area where the internet is unstable.
Nyoni? or
share.
Matthews? Let me share with Comrade Yoni, can I share with you so that you can share the screen? Okay, thank you. Just in the email,
Okay.
but Elisha, you can continue as I share.
So some of the things that we're trying to look even within the presentation is why feminist analysis is important when it comes to UNDROP, and what are the weaknesses, what are the recommendations, what are the success, and looking even from a personal living with disability who are part of them, of the peace and constituency, which is they're usually left behind, including even queer people, that's gender conforming people. But at the same time, majority of the women within the peasant space are women that we know within our own diversity, even girls, they are never included in this kind of conversations and discussions. And some of the work that I can be able to raise is that why is feminism important within these discussions of UNDROP is that we know clearly the feminist perspective, even if it's within different intersectionality sector, we fight capitalism, we fight patriarchy, we fight system of oppression that works against our people. And some of this system of oppression against our people are organizations that are also bringing in contradiction, even funders within the space that are bringing in contradiction to make us divided. And one of the examples I was able to give when we're doing the convening with the Kenya Peace and League is that we know clearly Monsanto and the Bill Gates are people also are pushing for the criminalizations also of farmers, but at the same time they are pushing in the contradiction of financing also other progressive causes within the movement, like on SRHR, where we know clearly that a lot of funders are pulled out and coming in. These are the things that we have to talk as comrades in terms of intersectionality of organizing, that we don't get divided. We know who is our common enemy. And if it's a common enemy, what does it mean for our people? Because at the same time, even now with the agreement that's signed by the Kenyan government at the moment, when it comes with the health data, that they're going to share the health data with them, with the US in the next 25 years, this it means also our food is going to be poisoned. And if it gets to be poisoned and they have this data, they're able to say, we are going to make these Africans or prescribe them to certain diseases, which also we know clearly from other vaccines that have worked against Africans that can lead us to our health not being okay. And some of the work that we have been able to do, that's CGHRD, together with the leadership of Kenya Peace and League, with also the partnership of Friends of Lake Turkana, is that we have had conversation even with South to South conversation, trying to see how do we ensure like the land policy that we have currently are reflecting in the adaptation of also the UNDROP. Because UNDROP can look very nice in paper, but in terms of practicality, what Professor Uche said is that if it does not reflect to our national constitutions, our government, they run away from the responsibility. If it does not reflect also in terms of the needs of the locals within the community, it does not reflect to our own needs as African people. And we had to take this conversation from our local area to also another platform that we are together with the Kenya Peace and Leagues of social movements called the Baraza, where we're telling comrades, transnational problems require transnational solution. And if it requires transnational solutions, it means we can't say this is a struggle for Kenya. And for the comrades who are present in the Kenyan for the counter of COP, we are very clear, even within the declaration, that it's not only a Kenyan issue, but however, we agree there are progressiveness within different countries that people have been able to push back, like even Zim, that other countries, things are a bit different. So how do we ensure, one, the solidarity is transnational, at the same time also the protection of the defenders, because we have seen also not only just in Africa but also in Latin America that a lot of people who fight for the rights of the peasants, it's also women, the non-conforming people, and land is a big issue. When we talk about seed sovereignty, food sovereignty, and land, this is a very area that is very, it has a lot of contestation. And if it has a lot of contestation, how do we bring in other movements with the geopolitics that is existing now and even the national politics of different countries and the continent to ensure that the presentation is equally felt in terms of also ensuring the safety and protection of us defenders who are defending even the rights of peasants and also the peasants themselves. And some of the
Hello. It's
mention
like
and
we
from our
lost you a bit.
conversation is that where we are now, movement has to acknowledge, and now where we are now, the movement has to acknowledge that we need to do cross movements learning, where we're able to understand what it means to have different strategies, which also you have mentioned some that we can engage, and not only just the UN body, but also African Union. They have to be really accountable, and even our regional bodies, they have to be accountable to us as Africans. And some of this, thank you, CD, for bringing the presentation. So I'll just go to the first one so that I'm able to go fast without also wasting time. So the first one, what is UNDROP in simple language, which also Prof said, so I'll not repeat some of the things. Peasant and rural workers have a right, and right to land, seeds, food, water, livelihood, culture, and dignity. It goes across with dignity, you cannot avoid. Government must respect, protect, and fulfill these rights, including our own local governments. We know the adaptation, which also Prof, you're able to say. And then also like next slide, CD, please. Why does UNDROP matters for us to Africans? I'll be very particular with this. Land grabbing is a big issue by corporation, even religious institution. And we know clearly, even most of our communities where we are seeing big church institution and corporation taking up the lands that we have. Climate change is hurting small-scale farmers and peasant farmers, which are never in the discussion rooms when it comes to even climate conversation. It's only big companies and also like the multinationals. There's also like why it matters because there's criminalization of peasant farmers and land defenders. So there's need of also ensuring the peasants are protected and land defenders and seed sovereignty or even food sovereignty because of the politics between food security and our position on seeds. Indigenous seeds are being replaced by corporations seeds. So we are seeing a lot of our farmers in Africa, the statistics that Prof were able to mention, that are being able to be forced to change our indigenous seeds, which are being taken also by the global north to be eaten there, and then they're criminalizing. Like even in my community in Kenya, in Machakos, we're seeing farmers, because of our area, there's a lot of drought, that they're criminalizing peasant farmers who are planting the green crumbs, which is also a big issue. Peasants also have a right as rights holder and not as beneficiary. You have to be very clear from a feminist perspective.
Rachel,
Next slide. Yes.
maybe
CD?
speak a bit slowly. Speak a bit slowly for the interpretation.
Okay, for the translator. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
A recent reading of the UNDROP, what we feel, women grow over 70% of food in rural Africa. That's not contested in our own diversity. Women rarely own land. We know the politics on land from our own indigenous and culture, but it's also very patriarchal in terms of ownership of land. And for those of us who also maybe have they want to own the land, the bureaucracy around owning land and papers is not pro-women. There's limited decision-making power within the space when it comes to women owning the land. And then the other point is that gender-based violence and exclusion within even the land sector. Because if you were to talk about land and seeds, and also when we are contexting as women farmers in our own diversity, we know now it results to gender-based violence and even femicide, a big issue that all of us are pushing to ensure that women, we are protected and we're not killed, which also a lot of peasant farmers have been involved as most of us are even members of End Femicide in Kenya. And this is an area that we must read as feminists, that this is not only a struggle for only peasant farmer, it's a feminist struggle. Peasant rights is also a women's rights issue and a feminist issues. And then also like successes after 7 years. We have seen there's stronger peasant movement and network like La Via, La Campesina, feminist movements like ourselves, World March of Women, Kenya Peasant League, the South African team, like everybody who is here, they're part of this process is ensuring that after the work being done by our comrades led by La Via, many of us are pushing from different faces. There's increased awareness of peasant rights as much as we need to push more. UN Working Group monitoring violation, where Professor Uche, you're part of, and also like giving us your input in terms of ensuring that this process exists, but if they exist, also what are the barriers? And I love the fact that you're in this conversation to be able to give us some of the intel in terms of what a civil society beyond just saying it's passed and then what next. There's need of also, there's been a lot of counter narratives to challenge corporate agriculture system in Kenya, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, and South Africa, which we have been collectively working, all of us, even within this space for many years, even within our community, and trying to link this struggle with different other struggles. Now we have seen there's an African charter on African values, something that also I know we discussed with the convening that was here in Nairobi, that will request all of you to check on it, because as much as they are coming, the anti-rights, anti-gender are coming for them, for the, let's say, women movement, feminist movement, sex worker movement, queer movement. They're also coming for our seeds. They're also coming for our indigenous knowledge. Next slide. See? So women peace and in terms of our own realities and the challenges that we face. We know, all of us, land ownership, it's a denial issue for most of us. Seed criminalization is increasing. Seed criminalization is increasing. There's a lot of unpaid care work. What I said about even the femicide issue. Leadership is not inclusive of most of us women within this space. Yet women will protect seed, feed communities, and defend our land. Next slide, CD. Challenges in implementing. Some Prof you mentioned, but one of the things that I'll be able to talk is around even the shrinking civic space of the defenders who are working within this space. That because of the cooperation, the corporates are giving money, and multinationals giving money our government, it hinders our way of participation because they're able to infiltrate within the laws that exist in our country that criminalizes farmers. The climate policy, they are not inclusive of peasant farmers. They are not at all. They don't have a feminist approach. And this needs to be very clear, even within the media platform, even if you're doing a lot of comm strategy, they're not giving up us space to ensure that we're able to talk about the shrinking civic space within this kind of work on UNDROP. Next slide. Land justice is equal to climate justice. We can't talk about climate change, what they usually say climate change. And for us, we believe it's not about climate change. It's about climate justice. So peasants protects a lot of biodiversity, which we know clearly. Our struggle is intersecting. It's not about climate only. It's not about fisheries. It's not about seeds. It's collective. Indigenous farming cools the planet. We know clearly that this is what we need for survival and for our life. Industrial agriculture fuels climate crisis, we know clearly. And that's why our community needs to be done political education to understand that it's no longer what they are bringing to us as government or even some funders who are playing double standards. No climate justice without peasants. We can't talk about climate justice. Even when people are going to COP, we know the spaces are not inclusive of most of us. So counter-COP movement strategy, which also KPL was leading, and Kenya and Lavia members, including some of us, civil society and movement leaders that we attended, is that this counter-COP, they need to be strengthened and resourced so that we're able to say what works for us without making the oppressor relax. Community education, we need to do it. I know we started this conversation long time CD with the team, Matthias, and we need to do more, even producing podcasts. And you know, there's like where also we did last time with the Pussy Power Festival. We need to do more of this knowledge in terms of podcasts. And this is something that we need to find resources as a movement, people to share knowledge from our own perspective.
Rachel,
At the end of
forgive
the
me.
day also, and sorry?
Again, slower, please.
Okay. Community legal advocacy and documentation. We have seen some of the countries here present taking the cases to court, including the one for anti-GMO where the KPL was leading and winning, the one that also was led by the Seed Savers Network also on the right to seed winning. So there are gains that are making us win, but at the same time, we need to take as many cases as possible from different African countries, not only just few from the South and the East. We have also to talk with the West Africans comrades, Central, to ensure that it also has a collective power. Cross-border movement solidarity is key to ensure that we are able to link with different movements to even be in solidarity with the peasant farmers. And this is key even within the feminist movement, that our feminist political...
Rachel, you should be concluding now.
Yes, I'm almost concluding. So some of the recommendations that we are putting to government is that we have to push from our national government to turn UNDROP into laws, because they're not into laws, protect women's land rights, insist on not criminalizing peasant farmers, which we know is a collective struggle of us are pushing, and we should not be tired. but also analyzing also the geopolitics and how it's operating. To donors and the UN, we need to fund grassroots movements and organizations and movements that are standing also with our community. To movements like ourselves, we need to popularize the UNDROP locally, regionally, and internationally, because there's so much that needs to be done. Farmers are the ones who feed the world. Food is political. And center women and youth, as well as PWD who are within the peasant organizing, but also the queer folks who are within the space. Next one, solidarity statement is that from our end, peasants' rights are human rights. Food sovereignty is a
Rachel, we lost you. I think we've lost Rachel, and she was on the last slide. Thank you so much, Comrade Rachel, for that, and you have raised very important
climate
issue.
justice. Next slide. Yeah, next slide. So these are some
That
of
was
the
the
things
last.
that we can unpack.
Yes.
Yeah, we can unpack in terms of just reflecting, but also looking when we are doing the next is also seeing on how do we hold our regional bodies accountable. Thank you so much, and I look forward for the questions. And
Thank you.
the world is possible. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Comrade Rachel, for participating and actually highlighting critical issues, including the contradictions that end up even dividing the movement. And you've also raised an issue of the peasant right defenders. And of course, you find that most of the defense mechanisms available are more focused on governance issues, and you find that people are talking about environment, climate, face an array of threats, both from government and even from the corporations that are involved. And of course, I'm seeing people engaging in the chat. I would also advise, because we have some questions in the chat which we are going to come to once we go to the Q&A session. So I would also want to encourage members to also engage in the chat, just make comments, or even you are able to ask questions. So straight away, I would go to Comrade Hakim Balinaire from Uganda. Welcome, Comrade Hakim.
Okay. Thank you, David, for this opportunity. Speaking to all the who have convened, as already mentioned, Hakim Waliraine, and small scale farmer from Uganda, and also the chairperson of Eastern Southern Africa Small Scale Farmers Forum from Uganda, and the outgoing chairperson of Alliance for Food Sovereignty of Africa and East Africa, and other portfolios. My presentation will be rotating around. I'll talk about who we are. Then I'll be looking at the 3 articles which I have identified. Article 11, right to information. Article 17, right to land. Article 19, right to peasant seed. Then I will make my conclusions. ESA for Uganda, we are small-scale farmers forum, and in Uganda, we enhance our ability to make informed decisions and participate meaningfully in development of policies, meaningful policy processes. And we are many and work with farmer groups who are to of over 45,000 farmer groups or communities, and direct reach over 1 million and indirect over 10 million. As Tieno said, we are also members of Lavaya Campesina. In terms of what are those articles that have similar provisions to UNDROP, the one we selected, especially on article, we're looking at Article 11, right to information. One of them is the Constitution of Uganda, Article 41, which states, clause 1, which says that every citizen has a right of access to information in the possession of state or another organ or agents of the state, except where the release of the information is likely to prejudice the security or sovereignty of the state or interfere with the right to privacy of another person. This provides a constitutional foundation for peasants, access to land, agriculture, investment, and information on compensation. The other one is the Access to Information Act 2205, Section 51, Clause 1, which provides that every citizen has the right to access to information and records in possession of a public body or a private body where the information is required for the exercise or protection of any right. Then Section 5 Clause 2 further provides that a person's right of access to information is not affected by any reason the person gives for seeking access. Then the other area is the National Land Policy of 2013, paragraph 66, clause 2, which provides that government shall ensure that land information is accessible, transparent, and affordable to all citizens. This aligns with UNDROP emphasis on a transparent land governance. What are those laws that could be challenging, regardless of it being provided into the Constitution and other policies which I've just said and laws, but still they contradict sometimes themselves. So one of them is Access to Information Act exemption. Section 24, Clause 1 provides that a public body may refuse to disclose information where the information relates to cabinet records, defense, security, or international relations. In practical, land deals, oil-related and land acquisition and investment contracts affecting peasants are often classified under these exemptions. Then 2 is the Petroleum and Exploration and Production Act of 2013. Section 152, Clause 1 provides that a person shall not disclose information obtained under this act except where authorized by the minister. Now, what are those documented abuses for this Article 11? One of them is into the Hoima, where the oil is being exploited. Communities are being displaced for oil projects, and quite a number of things have happened there. Farmers not receive information, even evaluation methods, timelines, and even contracts before eviction. The other is the large-scale plantation leases. This was also happening on like the Kalangala, where palm oil and other places of this country. Then failure even society have documented this repeated non-response of land officers to communicate information. And the laws supporting on Article 17, I know time is not always good, but let me try. The Constitution of Uganda, still on Article 26, Clause 1 provides that every person has a right to own property either individually or in association with others. Then Article 26, Clause 2 further provides that no person shall be compulsorily deprived of a property except where taking or possession is necessary for public use and subject to prompt payment of fair and adequate compensation. Then the Land Act, Cap 227, Section 29, Clause 1, recognizes lawful and bona fide occupants. A lawful occupant includes a person who entered the land with the consent of a registered owner. Any Section 32 provides protection against eviction. A tenant by occupants shall not be evicted except in accordance with this act. Then the other policy is the National Land Policy of 2013, paragraph 50, clause 1, which provides that the government shall put in place measures to strengthen security of tenure for customary land owners. What are those laws that can challenge Article 17? The Constitution against itself on compulsory acquisition, Article 26, 2 clause, Section A, allows the deprivation of land where taking of possession is necessary for public use in the interest of defense, public safety, public order, or public health. This clause is frequently used to justify large-scale displacement of peasants. Then the Land Act, conversion and registration bias. Section 8 allows conversion of customary tenure to freehold, which practice has enabled elites to formalize land owner users. Then the Petroleum Law, the Petroleum Act vests all petroleum resources in the state, subordinating the land rights of peasants to extractive interests. Some of the documented acts already, as I said, but this one is especially the Hoima Shoga evictions. Over 35,000 people were affected because of that plantation. Then the oil-related displacement, the one I spoke about above, and then the criminalization of land defenders. These are some of the things which are happening. Then the other third article was the UNDROP Article 19, the right peasant seed supporting laws. You already know that in the UNDROP it says that peasants have the right to save, share, exchange, and sell, farm save the seed, and participate in seed-related decision making. But in the Seed and Plant Act of 2019, Section 3 provides that the object of this act is to regulate production, processing, certification, and marketing of seed and planting materials. This recognizes seed system as essential to agriculture. The National Seed Policy provides for promotion of informal seed alongside the formal seed sector. The informal seed is what we call somehow farm-managed seed system, but in our country they call it informal. Then the Plant Production and Health Act of 2016, Section 4 provides for the protection of plant health to sustain agricultural livelihood. The laws that challenge that Article of 19, one is the Plant Variety Protection Act of 2014. This is the worst of it because it doesn't even recognize peasant farmers as breeders. Section 26, Clause 1 provides that a breeder has the exclusive right to produce, sell, market, export, or import a protected variety. Then Section 26, Clause 2 limits farmers' right to reuse protected seed without commercial exchange, directly conflicting with the UNDROP. Then the Seed Regulation of 2017 requires mandatory certification for sale, which criminalizes the informal seed exchange by peasants. The documented practices, as many will also be said arresting of local seed traders accused of selling fake seed. You know, here you cannot sell our seed commercially. Then crop losses due to counterfeit seed supply, then marginalization of indigenous seed system in favor of commercial varieties promoted through state programs. So as I conclude, at AU and the regional economic level, the CADAP strategy and action plan of 2026-2035 and Kampala declaration, it spoke widely about small-scale farmers, but basically they did not mention things like UNDROP. No, we didn't mention it anywhere, but there are quite some interesting areas which we can maybe ride upon and popularize UNDROP when there is implementation of the CADAP strategy of 2026-2035. And for example, under strategic objective 1, intensifying sustainable food production, agro-industrialization and trade, it says that one of the strategic interventions, it says that it shall address rural development issues by promoting farmer-managed seed system and climate-resilient indigenous seed and emphasizing circular economy within the CADAP process. So you find that the language is good, but how do we align it with the UNDROP and how do we popularize it? Then at the East African Community and the East African Legislative Assembly and the East African Secretariat, they have also endorsed agroecology. There is a resolution by the YALA, and also the East African Committee is processing. I think they are trying to develop a structure which will recognize, which will incorporate agroecological organic agriculture. So it is creating a window for us to lobby the adoption of UNDROP principle. However, there is a strong industrial push for commercialization through harmonization process, like the East African Seed Bill policy, and then the African Harmonization Seed Policy Framework, and also other like the Arusha Protocol, which is under UNDROP 1991, which Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda have already ratified. So in conclusion, overall, Uganda legal framework partially reflects UNDROP, but structural loopholes, investment-driven laws, and weak enforcement systematically undermine peasant rights to information, land, and seed. The lived reality of forced evictions, opaque land deals, and colonization of seed saving shows that alignment with UNDROP remains largely rhetorical. In fact, we developed a policy framework on UNDROP on several policies and presented a request to the Prime Minister to have a meeting, but until now, we submitted last year in May. Up to now, they have not given us a response, whether they will give us space to meet the Prime Minister. So do you see how hard states are not willing to take on board, like Professor Uche was presenting. So thank you for this opportunity. I submit.
Thank you so much, Comrade Akim, for that. And of course, there seems to be quite a number of laws that are supporting and also contradicting. I think those are contradictions that we need to highlight on this space. So I'll go straight away to Comrade Ngoni. Ngoni Chikoe. I hope Comrade Nyoni is able to share the presentation for Comrade Ngoni. I shared it. But meanwhile, Comrade, you can start as Nyoni is sharing it. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Comrade CD. I would like to say hi to other comrades this meeting. Also thanking Lavia Kambasina for organizing this webinar, and also the organizers who have been working hard for this day on commemoration of the UNDROP after 7 years. My name is Ngoni. I'm with the Zimbabwe Small Organic Farmers Forum. I'm an activist, a practitioner, agroecology. I've been working in this struggle for about 2.5 decades. So it is really insightful from the previous presentations that we had from Dr. and other presenters we presented, that actually we need the UNDROP to be domesticated into our national government. Yeah, there seem to be no political will in the adoption and domestication of UNDROP, which is really we need to raise some kind of education and awareness for it to be adopted. So I don't know if Comrade Nyoni is ready now.
Comrade Matheus, are you able to share? I think Nyoni, can you share the presentation?
I'm on it. Just give me a minute.
Okay.
I will actually need Ngoni to, okay, that's the document there. Let's see it.
There you are. Comrade Ngoni, you can go ahead.
Nyoni, if you can zoom in a little bit.
I don't see it from here, but yes. Oh, yes, yes. Thank you very much. The rights of peasants 7 years after adoption of UNDROP. We are talking about the Zimbabwean perspective. Introduction, the key UNDROP articles related to work, to our work. We have Article 17 in the UNDROP, which is the right to land and natural resources. Also, we've chosen among the 27 articles something that is more relevant to the focus of the work that we are doing in Zimbabwe. So this is what I'm going to present. Then we also have Article 19, the right to seed, the traditional agricultural knowledge. This is SKI within country specifics. We also have Article 10, the right to participate in decision making. We've seen consultations being done, but they are not a true reflection of the representation of smallholder farmers. There are other unions that are in Zim, whereby if they are consulted, then it will be comprehensive to say we have consulted smallholder farmers. So that's the articles that we have chosen from the intro. Then what are policies and laws in Zimbabwe that are similar to the UNDROP articles I've highlighted? We have Article 17 of the Zimbabwe Constitution, Section 71, that recognizes the right of property, including land. So you see there is a link between the UNDROP and what's being said by our national laws here in Zimbabwe. We also have Article 19 that is specifically on the Seed Act that regulates seed production, distribution, touching, and seed rights, touching on seed rights. So it actually means UNDROP, it has been adopted in 2018, but national governments also had some laws that they do have, which marries with the UNDROP. We have policies and laws in Zimbabwe that are similar to UNDROP. Article 17, the land acquisition policy and lack of secure land tenure for smallholder farmers. Though the Constitution stipulates that the people have the right to property and ownership of land, but finds sorry, I'm having problems with my. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Just continue. I think Nyoni is trying to make it, yes. It's better now? Ngoni?
Hello?
Is it better now?
Yes, it's better now. Thank you very much.
Continue.
Land acquisition policies and lack of secure land tenure for smallholder farmers. Like I was saying, the land stipulates that people have got the right to property and the right to land. But when it comes to the tenures, the policies itself, smallholder farmers are not entitled to land ownership. They say the land is owned by the state. So that's only the commercial farmers have entitled deeds to land. So it's contradictory to, though the law is there, but it's contradictory to what UNDROP is saying. Article 19, of inspired seed laws, restricting farmers' rights to sell, exchange seeds. So we are fearing the unknown because our country has not signed off, but it is strongly believed that there are probabilities that the government will sign. So from the civil society's perspective, we're making a lot of noise to trying to stop our government from signing of 91. Then Article 10, there's limited participation of peasants in decision-making processes. Really, we find we have got our national policy, agricultural policy framework, where they are representative made of other sectors, less representation, non-representation. So there is less participation in decision-making. Next slide. Then abuse of peasants' rights in Zimbabwe, Article 15, where we are giving examples of the right to land, where there are land grabs and displacements for smallholder farmers for commercial farming. For example, there are foreign direct investments that the government might engage into with foreigners like the Russians, the Chinese, that they would want to produce certain types of crops. So this might end up having smallholder farmers evicted because they don't own land. The land is owned by the state. So it will pave way for development. But our question would be, whose development is it when one is being displaced from ancestral land? So we also we have insured land tenure leading to evictions and loss of livelihoods by smallholder farmers. They're actually evicted for when there's no compensation. We also have another example of lack of compensation for land taken for development. We've quite a number of projects that are going on currently where we have the rush for lithium rush. Small-scale farmers in the communal lands are being displaced by the Chinese who are coming in the name of investments. and those people are just displaced, and there's no compensation whatsoever. And also the impact assessments are not followed this when one wants to do extractivism. So there's quite a lot of damage to the environment and soils. So abuse of peasants' rights in Zimbabwe on Article 19. Examples are restrictions of saving and exchanging traditional seeds due to commercial laws that exist currently in Zimbabwe. Another example is where there is limited access to diverse local adapted seed varieties, dependence on expensive commercial seed affecting smallholder farmers' livelihoods. Next slide. Abuse of peasants' rights, Article 20. Examples are there is exclusion of smallholder farmers from agricultural policy formulation, like I've alluded already, and also the lack of presentation of peasants' interest in decision-making bodies. There is also limited access to information and resources for peasants to participate. For example, when we look at budget consultations, the budget processing, there should be consultations from the local level until we get to national level. But that information is not accessible. Only maybe hear it on print or radios that people have been to consultations when actually the farmers were not there also to contribute what they think the budget should also cater for smallholder farmers. Then what are recommendations for Zimbabwe? We're looking at legal reforms, align national laws with UNIDROP to protect peasants' rights, support for farmer seed systems, promote farmers' rights to save, exchange, and sell farm-managed seeds, inclusive in decision-making, agricultural policy, and program design. Actually, we do have the Fumvuza Ischwala program, which has borrowed some principles from agroecology. But actually, there's need for program designing so that farmers also input with their indigenous knowledge systems, so that as we all know that agroecology cools the earth. So there are quite a number of industrial agricultural practices that are being put to when farmers are not also coming into designing of projects that the government might want to support. So in conclusion, Zimbabwe's laws. In conclusion, Zimbabwe's laws and policies that both align with that both aligns with and challenge UNIDROP articles. There is also abuse of peasants' rights persists, affecting land, seeds, and participation in decision-making. Recommendations include strengthening legal protections, promoting farmers' rights, and ensuring participation in policymaking. So actually, I think this strengthening and unpacking of policies can go through maybe the agroecologies that we have, where we need actually to train ideological politics on seed systems, on food systems within the network, and also encourage some cross-learning among movements from different specific countries. So I end up there. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Comrade Ngoni, for that. And straight away, I would go to Comrade Harry May. from South Africa. I'm not sure if Hari can share from his side, but if not, then again, Nyoni is able to share. Welcome, Comrade Hari, and thank you, Comrade
Hi.
Ngoni, for that.
Welcome,
Welcome.
comrades, and all the comrades that are participating in this webinar. I see some of my comrades from South Africa, like Comrade Lungisa, that's part of the webinar. So I'm just waiting for someone to Okay, so maybe I'll start by saying, so since the adoption of UNDROP 7 years ago on this day, our government has done very little to nothing to promote UNDROP. So some of the people, can you hear me?
Yes,
Comrade?
yes, go ahead.
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you, Comrade May.
Okay, so the government is not even sure where this would be located, whether it should be in the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. And our view is this should be located within the Department of Land Reform and Rural Development. So you can see there's unclarity, and if there's unclarity of where this should be located, they haven't done anything to disseminate information around UNDROP. So even prior to the promulgation of UNDROP, our comrades made some inputs into looking at legislation in this country. There was a high-level panel on the assessment of key legislation and acceleration of fundamental change. And we highlighted the importance of peasant rights. And we said, one of these days we will have a declaration. At that time it was a draft declaration, and we need to take cognizance of that. Can we move on to the next slide, Matthias? Matthias? So I will deal with the following articles. So Article 13, at least no one's talked about this one, the right to work. So, and I will specifically focus on the issue of farm workers. And then I will also deal with Article 15, the right to food and food sovereignty. And then the article that all of us covered, the right to land. So I think there's a lot of overlap and intersection of these articles within UNDROP. So it's also covered in other parts of UNDROP. So also at the level of our country, so our policies and our laws, there's a great deal of overlap in our laws and our policies with regard to covering these specific articles. We can move to the next slide. Matthias. So in terms of Article 13, the right to work. So first of all, to say, with regard to all the articles, our Constitution is very explicit on all these matters. For instance, so our Constitution has got a section on, for instance, labor rights. So in our Bill of Rights, in Chapter 2 of our Constitution, it highlights most of the things that we find in UNDROP. And then we also have in South Africa the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. And through that act, there's a sectoral determination 13 that determines minimum wages and conditions, fair pay, regulated hours, leave, all of that for farm workers. And then there's a broader framework of the Labor Relations Act. And then there's, for farm workers, there's also a specific act the Extension of Security of Tenure Act that provides for issues related to housing rights, protection from unfair and lawful evictions, etc. Then we also have Social Security for everyone in the country through the Unemployment Insurance Act, and also broader labor legislation, compensation for occupational injuries and diseases act. And then lastly, with regard to our labor situation in South Africa, I think we also have the Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration, usually called the CCMA. So this body resolve workplace disputes through conciliation, mediation, and arbitration. And this is a free service that's offered by the government. It's got commissioners that usually would chair a session. And if a farm worker has got a dispute with an employer, they end up at the CCMA. It could be the workplace dispute could be conciliated or mediated, or maybe in the end there's some arbitration. So I think that is some of the good models that some of our comrades in also the region and the rest of Africa can learn from South African experience. With regard to food and food sovereignty, or the Constitution guarantees everyone the right to have access to sufficient food, water, and social security. And it is put an obligation on the state to progressively realize this right. And then we also have a national policy on food and nutrition security of 2014, which provides strategies to ensure food access, but also faces challenges, in particularly in implementation, given that the food terrain is also controlled by corporate power. Then our comrades in civil society drafted a People's Food Sovereignty Act and last year, and it's in a form, still in a draft form. So, and this was built on a draft of 2016. So it's trying to transform the food system. So by protecting indigenous seeds, promoting biodiversity, promoting agroecological farming methods, supporting small-scale producers and community food systems, and challenging corporate control of the food system. So that is not an official act of our government. So that is what we want to move to. And those are the things that we are advocating at the level of Parliament. And then with regard to land, so our Constitution is very clear. There's a whole section on land, section 25. And then we have got lots of different pieces of legislation. So there's the Restitution of Land Rights Act that restitute people who lost land as a result of apartheid actions of dispossession. There's the Provision of Land and Assistance Act, so that provides for land acquisition. So under that, also people who acquired land through municipal commonage, it's also that particular act that enables that to be done. And then there's, I've already talked this, the Extension of the Security of Tenure Act, or ESTA, which provide protection to vulnerable occupiers. There's also the Labor Tenants Act. And then in 2024, there's been the Expropriation Act. So to say that we can, in terms of public interest, that we can expropriate land. I mean, it's always been done in this country. There's always been an Expropriation Act if they need to build schools or a road or a dam, the state has the right to expropriate land because that would be in the public interest. You can move to the next slide. So what are the things that are not aligning up with UNDROP? So everyone always have this view of South Africa that we've got very good constitution and we've got very good legislation or laws. So despite all these laws, like my comrade from Kenya said, issues of violence, inadequate housing, illegal eviction, poor implementation persists. And it's highlighting a gap between the legal rights and the lived realities for many farm workers and peasants. So, and then secondly, I think a key issue is also, despite our progressive policies, there's also been historical land dispossession and market liberalization that hinder small-scale farmers, peasant farmers of getting access to land to produce food for a livelihood. So we need to navigate the tension between these constitutional mandates, national policy, and powerful corporate interests. And there's also a growing movement pushing for deep systemic changes towards genuine food sovereignty and justice for all South Africa and its people. So it's not just kind of cosmetic changes that needed, but if we're talking about people getting access to land, like the professor said at the start, that it's a big proportion of people on this African continent that occupies land and has got an interest in the land. And then South African land laws are very complex. And there's always this kind of balancing act between property rights and dealing with historical injustices so that in the end we can promote equity. So, and like for instance, I mean, if you look at, like I was speaking about the Expropriation Act, a lot of balancing had to be done in terms of the property rights and dealing with historical injustice. And then lastly, so in Article 17 of UNDROP, it also talks about land reform, that governments should ensure that they invest in land reform programs. Now, if you look at the last 30 years of land reform in this country, so progressively from 1996, when the land reform program started, to now, the pace has slowed, and also the budget for land reform has decreased. So it raises a question whether there's a real interest from our state to really transform the landscape in this country. We can move to the next slide.
Maybe you should be concluding.
Yeah. So what are some of the evidence of UNDROP violations? So there's still, and this is very explicit in UNDROP, still illegal eviction of farm workers. And then farm workers are not provided with the things they are supposed to be, like, for instance, adequate housing, they've got dangerous working condition. And then generally there's a poor implementation of labor laws and other related pieces of legislation. And then the state is not taking appropriate measures to establish and promote sustainable food system that are sufficiently labor intensive. The model is a corporate model where you provide land to a few people, and it's not labor intensive. It's also with automation that people will get, for instance, access to land through our land reform programs. Can move to the next slide. So I think our policies and our laws in this country, I mean, they talk the same language as the declaration, but when it comes to the fulfillment of the obligation of the state, so implementation remains a big challenge for the state. So some of our laws need to be amended, and I think, I mean, this is what most of the speakers said, it needs to be domesticated. And the challenge it raises is how, like for instance, our difficult parliamentary processes. So how do you amend all those pieces of legislation with the full roster of the people sleeping and sitting in parliament? So that is one of the big challenges, right? You can move up, Matthias. So what are our recommendations? So the first thing is we need to popularize the declaration. So not only with state actors, but also with the people that we work. Can you zoom in, Matthias? Matthias, let me put on my glasses. Okay, you can move up. You can move up. So, and for me, I mean, always, if we say that the government is serious, it means they need to provide funding and a budget for such a process and for undertaking it at the broad South African scale. Then, like South Africa, we supported this UNDROP. But for instance, for peasants, they don't see the benefits. And for indigenous people, they say it's very, very slow, these benefits. So an important thing is that we require stronger legislative and practical framework. So also, as I mentioned before, how do we domesticate UNDROP into the existing policies that we have? And then I think our comrade from ESAF talked about this, that we should also be engaging at the SADC and the AU level. So I think we can learn something from the harmonization of the seed laws in the region. So maybe we can also as activists popularize and advocate for the use of the declaration at both the regional and at the AU level. Can you move on, Matthias? And then I think, and I haven't heard anyone talking about this issue, we also need to have test cases. I mean, looking at our law in the countries where we use UNDROP and see, looking at law reform and also starting to insert UNDROP and the provisions of UNDROP into our legal processes. So for instance, I mean, and I'll end with this story. One of our comrades in the FSC was harvesting field rooibos tea or wild rooibos tea in the Citrusdal area, and he was summoned to the magistrate court. So he cited Article 26 of the Peasant Rights Declaration on cultural rights and traditional knowledge. And in the end, I mean, the magistrate said that he had a point and he's going to scrap this from the role if he's been doing this for all these years, and it's part of their custom and tradition, is just gonna kick this case out of court and remove it from the court roll. So for me, it's also see legally how far we can go. I think, Matthias, can you move on? Just a minute and then I'll be done.
Yes.
That is the end of it, Harry.
Yeah.
That's the end of it.
Yeah, so for me, one of the things that I think, so it seems it would be very, very difficult to amend all these pieces of legislation and insert or domesticate some of the UNDROP. So maybe, it's looking at, like for instance, in our case, in regulations. So maybe there should be a regulation on peasant rights where we can actually include the whole peasant rights declaration as part of a piece of legislation. So I think, for me, that is some of the practical ways and also the ways that we've engaged over the last years of including things through regulation. Thanks, comrades.
Thank you so much, comrades and friends. And of course, we are just on top of the hour. And today is a day of the peasants, and I was being tempted to stop some of the speakers, but again, I was remembering that peasants always face limitations in some spaces. Yeah, but I think started around 10 minutes late, and we also have translators. So I just want us, because I've seen some comments on the page. Some of them are not really questions; they're just comments, like from Lungisa, from Rua. It would be interesting to know how the government responded to the assessment questionnaire in comparison to the CS. So I think this is very important. I think this was directed to the prof, because our government is also responding to some of the calls, and how are they responding to them? I think that's also a critical issue. And of course, Susan has also raised an issue about resource mobilization for UNDROP. And of course, when we're talking about resource, we're also talking about resources to support peasant rights. And of course, Article 27 is very clear about the obligations of the United Nations and other institutions, especially right now that we are seeing a decline of the ODA, Official Development Assistance, and issues of climate financing, the COPs keeps on being postponed. So I think this is also a critical issue. And of course, others are comments. Matthews was talking about the cross movement planning and saying that yes, it's larger than this. It's also a challenge. So what stresses and themes are we already converging on? I think this is a critical issue that we might want to have a follow-up on in the space for movement building. And of course, the shifting in the donor world by Comrade Beryl, and how can we ensure that? Of course, we have got the changing geopolitics. Now we are seeing the day is very long today in the geopolitical arena. Yeah, so comrades and friends, I think I might not allow for comments because of time, but I will maybe give a minute. If I know, maybe I know the presentation was very much straight to the point, and maybe I would, if possible, maybe Prof, if maybe you can have a minute or so, because there are some issues that have really come up, and I see they are also in line with one of your presentations. So, Prof, if you are still available, maybe you can have a minute or so just to make a comment, and then we can close the webinar also for the interest of our translators, because translation is also work, and without translators, there is no revolution. So, Prof, if you're still available, maybe 1 minute you can just mention.
Okay. My 1 minute is that African farmers are very important to the continent and to the world, and that we need to promote farmers and our peasants, and that the doing what they need to do, and we need to move to the next level. Africa needs to set the standard on farmers' rights, on the right to food, on food sovereignty. Africa needs to be at the forefront. Right now, we are not at the forefront. We need to address intersectionality of issues. It's not a one size fits all. We have female women farmers, we have farmers with disability, we have youths that are, nobody listens to the youths in Africa because we privilege old age and wisdom, which is fine, but the demography is changing. Africa has the largest youth population in the world, and we can't wait for them to all run away from the city, from the rural areas before we start bringing them back. This is the time to be proactive about how to keep our youths in the rural areas gainfully employed on the farm. So two things I want to say is that policy coherence. Our policies are all over the map. The trade policies do not align with cultural policies, and they do not align with investment policies. So this is the time to push for policy coherence. And it's critical in Africa because many governments speak from different sides of their mouth, and bringing it together, it's a big challenge. Regional bodies, and it's time to put them also on the spot. I've sent you some of my recent statements. I've tried to bring the issues of farmers to the forefront and also bring it to the level of the African institutions. And it's time to ask questions about African institutions, because the African Union, the African Commission, the African Court, they have a big role to play in this. My personal experience in the 1 year that I've been a member of the working group is that issues about farmers is not acknowledged, right? It tends to be minimized. And I think that that is wrong. People say, oh, you're talking about farmers' rights. What else is there to talk about? And I think that we can move it to the forefront. In many other countries in the world, farmers are a privileged group. They listen, people listen, policymakers listen to the farmers. Is the case, and we need to turn it around. I think that UNDROP has a key role in emphasizing collective rights, in emphasizing some of the rights that hitherto have not been emphasized. But we need to move to the next level of filing complaints, of strategic litigation, of engaging with regional bodies, including the African Development, right? No, what are the international financial institutions? What is their role, either in enhancing the rights of farmers or actually valuing farmers? What is the role of the African Development Bank? Even before we get to the World Bank and the other international financial institutions. This conversation is just the starting point. It cannot be the end point. I thank Lavia Campesina for arranging this. I am ready to sessions, maybe once a month webinar, because the goal of disseminating UNDROP is a huge role. We can have a monthly webinar until this issue becomes top issue for every parliamentarian in Africa, for every lawmaker, for every executive, for the African Human Rights Commissions. I'm not sure that anybody on this today's webinar is from the Commission, the National Human Rights Commission. I don't know. From the Parliament, I don't think so. From the executive, we need to keep pushing this point to the point where it becomes an everyday conversation. I hope, I wish, and I look for a day, maybe in a year's time, where when we have this conversation, the National Human Rights have the parliamentarians join, executive join. It's a common problem. And one final thing, I want to leave a challenge for all of us. Can African farmers, are they able to feed the continent? Can they feed the continent? And I ask this because statistics shows that food import costs. The current statistics shows that Africa is about to spend, I think, about $30 to $35 billion for this year on food imports. My challenge is, why is Africa's food import rising? Is it because the African farmers are not able to feed the continent? Or is it because there are structural problems that make it difficult for our farmers to do their job? Or is it, so that is a big challenge. Africa's food import is rising every year, and this year it's targeted to be at 30 to 35 billion. I forget the exact number. The question is why? If the farmers cannot be pushing for rights if they're not able to meet the demand. And I'm not saying they're not able to meet the demand. I like to play the devil's advocate. Are African farmers up to the task? And if they're up to the task, then we need to do everything we can to give them the support and to reduce Africa's food import cost. It does not make sense for a poor continent like Africa to be spending 30 billion a year on food import. I thank you again for this conversation. I hope that is the starting point, not the end point, and I hope to see more submissions or complaints for, the Ugandan information is, some of them are new to me. The South African, how about we turn it into formal complaints to UNDROP Working Group? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and that's a good point to close it. Why is Africa food imports increasing? Is it because of the inability of the smallholder food producers to produce enough food, or is it because of the structural problem? I think that question raises very significant issue that is a warranting investigation or warranting further engagements. And of course, issues of fragmentation of policies is also very, very much prevalent because there are different policies addressing, like food. We have water policy, land policy, all of them addressing the issue of food production. I think those are some of the critical issues. And also one key issue also that is emerging here is in the process of domestication of UNDROP, then, we always have the laws on treaty at the international level, and also at the country level, we have got the treaty making laws. Almost these countries have got laws through which international obligations are domesticated into the local laws. I think that's an issue that we can also look at. And of course, parliamentary standing orders. Different countries have got different parliaments and standing orders on how. I think that's a key area that we can also look at. And of course, the sharpening contradictions that have been raised in all the presentations, whereby we have got the same constitution on one hand saying farmers have rights, and on the other hand saying they don't have rights on another issue. So those are actually contradictions. Another contradiction is a statement that cannot be true or false at the same time. And of course, a key issue is the involvement of the international organizations. And Article 27 is very clear. We have seen Office of the High Commission on Human Rights at the international level actually being very supportive. But you find that in countries like Kenya, South Africa, so I think, Prof, one of the issues that we can also look at is how are we able to lobby local players, especially local representations of the international organizations like FAO offices, etc. And lastly, I think you talked about sharing your email address, and I've seen Comrade Akim saying that how are we able to access you? So I think, and as Prof has said, I know Prof is very much available, and we always talk a lot. You can share your email, Prof, on the chat so that people who are here are able to organize similar of this. And of course, as I said, we're also organizing a webinar with Prof in February, which will specifically focus on we didn't have time maybe to talk about filing or the communication bit of it. Then how are we able to do that? And some of the issues that are being raised from these countries, to me, I think they warrant being actually represented in terms of urgent appeal, urgent letters, and regarding the means of communications that are actually available that have been presented by Prof. So issues of urgent appeals, letters of allegations, issues that are being raised are very pertinent. I think when they go there officially, then they can be able to be addressed as another letter. So we have the email addresses, and of course, because of time, we are sorry we could not have time for engagement. And of course, there are some also comments that are maybe one or two. Leonida is talking about dissemination of information on UNDROP is very key, together with budgetary allocations, very important. And of course, we know globally the funding for UN is shrinking. And I think we need also now to look at then how are we able to support some of these processes in the face. We are seeing drastic cuts on healthcare, drastic cuts on sexual AIDS, SRH. Then when we're looking at this also in the face of UNDROP, then how are we able to come with this space? And of course, I want to recognize the president of Comrade Zainal from SPI Indonesia. And SPI is also a member of the La Via Campesina. And actually, SPI is one of the movements that actually started this process of UNDROP, starting as a small marginalized voice that has now become amplified to the global level. Thank you so much, Comrade Zainal, for that. And of course, I also want to state that actually LDC is now also working on a different project, which is talking about a different trade framework. Because we have been talking about WTO, and just like the same process of UNDROP took over 20 years. I think the process started, and it might not be easy. But again, I know as La Via Campesina, we are also going to organize sessions also to brief people on this new trade framework and how, based on UNDROP and based on the present rights, and how it can be able to work. So, comrades and friends, from us in Kenya Prison League, we want to thank you for taking time, and we have your email addresses. We are going to share the recording, and also we are going to also share the report from this. And of course, we were also supposed to share with you the declaration or the resolution that came from the Counter COP Nairobi, Counter COP 30. We are going to share the same into your email addresses so that you can also be able to give your input. So thank you so much, comrades and friends. I know it is said that sometimes finishing a very good event like this might be difficult because there are so many issues, but the 2 hours has become very short, and we are going to organize this. I think also in the next year, we're also discussing with ZIMSOF and of course trying to organize youth exchange. We are trying to see if we can also bring in other members of the LDC and also ECVC and MST in Brazil, so that we can also see what is the role of youth and what, as Prof has said, that most of the youths are ignored, and that's why the Gen Zs are actually rising in Africa, because they are saying we are not being heard. And I think in this space that we need to do that. So thank you so much, and I want to give Comrade Matthews maybe to give the final word, and then we close. Welcome, Comrade Matthews.
Thank you very much, Sidi. And not the final word by any means. I just wanted to invite everyone to open their cameras. Let's remember that this will be now in the web space for eternity. So I'm watching the live stream on YouTube now. I'm just asking everyone to just open their camera, say goodbye to everyone. It's lovely to see you all once again. And clearly we have plenty of work to do together for next year. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Viva, comrades, viva.
Viva.
Let's see you all.
Thank you,
Noni,
comrades.
Clifford,
Viva.
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 John,
David,
Viva.
Thank you so much. Zainal.
Viva.
The
Petani.
Viva.
Petani.
Thank you. Hideo Petani.
Zainal. Thank you so much, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Happy holidays, comrades.
Bye.
See you next year.
Good to see you, Zainal.
Bye, everybody.
Yes.
Goodbye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.